The bell above the shop door chimed softly, its sound nearly swallowed by the steady ticking that filled every corner of the room. Clocks of all sizes lined the walls of Hazel Whitmore's world-tall grandfather clocks with carved oak faces. Delicate mantel clocks painted with fading roses, and dozens of pocket watches laid open on velvet cloths like sleeping beetles. Time lived here, time breathed here, and Hazel knew its language better than she knew most people. She looked up from her workbench when the door closed, sensing the change before she heard boots on the floorboards. Heavy boots. Cowboy boots. He stood just inside the doorway, hat in hand, dust clinging to his coat like he'd ridden straight out of the plains and into her quiet sanctuary. His presence felt out of place against the precision and calm of the shop, like a gust of wind through a room of candles. "Afternoon," he said, voice low, careful, as if afraid to break something fragile. Hazel wiped her fingers on her apron and offered a polite nod. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" The cowboy stepped forward, approaching the counter with a hesitance that surprised her. From his coat pocket, he produced a silver pocket watch. Its surface was worn smooth, the engraving almost erased by years of use. He laid it down gently, as though it were something alive. "It stopped," he said simply. "Happened 2 days ago." Hazel picked it up, turning it over in her palm. The weight of it told her everything. This wasn't a trinket or a recent buy. It had history. She pressed the crown, listened, frowned slightly. "When did it last work?" she asked. The cowboy hesitated. "Long enough." She glanced up at him then, catching something in his eyes, guarded, tired, but steady. "I'm Hazel," she said. "My father owns the shop, but I do most of the repairs now." "Jude," he replied. "Jude Carter." She nodded and carefully opened the watch, revealing the intricate mechanism inside. "It's a good piece," she murmured, "but it's been pushed hard, springs worn thin. Probably hasn't been serviced in years." Jude shifted his weight. "Belonged to my P.Y. Kept time through cattle drives, dust storms, and worse. Guess it finally had enough." Hazel smiled faintly. "Timepieces are like people. They carry more than they show." She set the watch beneath her magnifying glass, fingers already moving with practiced confidence. As she worked, Jude found himself studying Hathaway, her brow furrowed in concentration, the quiet certainty in her hands. The ticking of the shop seemed to grow louder, slower somehow, as though it had taken an interest in the moment. "I can fix it," Hazel said after a moment. "But it'll take a bit. The balance wheel's damaged." "That's all right," Jude replied quickly. "I ain't in a rush." She paused, surprised, and met his gaze again. Most folks wanted their clocks back yesterday. Time, to them, was always running away. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Late afternoon." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "I will. Thank you." As he turned to leave, Hazel felt something unexpected, a small tug, like a clock that had missed a beat and was trying to catch up. The bell chimed again as Jude stepped out, the door closing softly behind him. Hazel looked down at the open pocket watch, its stillness suddenly louder than any ticking in the room. For the first time in a long while, she wondered if time wasn't just something to be fixed, but something waiting to begin. The next afternoon, the sun hung low over the town of Red Hollow, painting the streets in gold and bronze. Hazel's shop smelled of oil and wood polish, the comforting scent of 100 clocks, all ticking together in careful rhythm. She worked quietly on Jude's pocket watch, tiny screwdrivers in hand, magnifying glass over the intricate gears. The bell above the door jingled, soft and familiar. Hazel looked up, expecting another customer, but not him. Jude stepped inside, boots dusted with the afternoon ride, hat in hand. His eyes lingered on her a moment before he spoke. "Afternoon, Hazel," he said. "Jude," she replied, setting the watch aside for a moment. "You're early." "Figured I'd see how the work's going," he said, leaning against the counter. The leather of his gloves creased as he relaxed, but he didn't touch anything. It was a careful kind of presence, like a horse standing near a fence, testing if it's safe to come closer. Hazel smiled faintly and returned to the watch. The balance wheel is tricky, needs patience and precision. But I think I've got it lined up now. Jude watched her hands move, precise and deliberate, noting the way her fingers adjusted the tiniest cogs without hesitation. "You've got a steady hand," he said. "I've been practicing since I was little," she replied, not meeting his eyes. It was strange, his presence seemed to stretch the room, slow time. She felt it in the tick-tock of the clocks, the hum of gears, the way each breath seemed longer than usual. He shifted closer, curiosity bright in his eyes. "How'd you get so good at this?" Hazel paused, lifting the screw delicately. "I guess I just love it," she said softly. "I like fixing what's broken, keeping things on track." Jude smiled faintly, almost shyly. "Ain't that what we're all trying to do in a way?" The words made Hazel look up, and for the first time, she noticed the way his eyes held a quiet steadiness, a patience uncommon in most of the townspeople. He wasn't hurried. He didn't rush. He simply waited, and somehow that made her fingers move more carefully, her mind more alert. Minutes passed, then hours, though neither Hazel nor Jude noticed. They worked in companionable silence, broken only by the occasional click of gears, or the faint sigh from a grandfather clock in the corner. Hazel explained the mechanism in low murmurs, more to herself than him, and Jude listened as though each word were a treasure. When she finally replaced the last spring, adjusting the wheel with meticulous care, she lifted the watch and wound it gently. The hands began to move, sweeping across the face with smooth precision. Hazel set it on the counter and leaned back. "It's done," she said, a note of pride in her voice. Jude picked it up carefully, turning it in his hands like he was holding something sacred. "Looks perfect," he said, and for the first time he looked at her, directly, really looked. "You make time easier, I think. Makes the world make sense again." Hazel felt a flutter she couldn't name. She was used to repairing clocks, not heartsore, the way her chest felt like it was syncing with someone else's rhythm. "I'll be back in a week," he said finally, setting the watch in his pocket. "Maybe sooner, if something else breaks." Hazel laughed softly, a sound that felt strange and warm. "I'll be here." As Jude tipped his hat and stepped outside, the bell chimed again. Hazel turned back to the workbench, but her eyes lingered on the empty doorway. The shop, once filled only with the steady tick of clocks, now seemed to hold a new kind of rhythm. One she wasn't quite sure she could measure, but didn't want to miss. Time, it seemed, had begun to slow, not because it was broken, but because something or someone was worth waiting for. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Hazel's shop, catching the dust motes like tiny stars suspended in air. She was already at her workbench, tinkering with a small, delicate carriage clock, when the familiar jingle of the doorbell announced another visitor. Jude stepped inside, removing his hat as always, boots scuffing softly against the wooden floor. His presence had become a quiet rhythm in her life, like the ticking of a clock she had learned to trust. "Morning, Hazel," he said, his voice carrying the easy cadence of someone accustomed to open skies and long rides. "Jude," she replied, setting aside her tools. "What brings you in so early?" "Thought I'd check on the watch," he said, smiling faintly. "It's been running smooth, but you never know. Can't have a cowboy stuck out on the range with a broken watch." Hazel laughed softly, the sound mingling with the ticking clocks. "Don't worry, it's holding steady. But if you're here, I might as well show you a few things." She gestured to a collection of clocks on the nearby shelves. "See, these, every one has a different heartbeat. Some are fast, some are slow. All need patience." Jude stepped closer, examining the gears and springs with an interest that was almost childlike. "Like people, then," he remarked. "Some folks take longer to move through life, but they're still moving." Hazel felt a warmth spread through her chest. He had a way of saying things that made her world feel wider, softer, somehow safer. She handed him a tiny screwdriver, showing him how to remove a back plate carefully. He worked slowly, hands steady but unsure, listening to her instructions. "You make this look easy," he said. "It's all about patience," she replied. "You have to understand the rhythm, the tick, the talk, the pauses in between." Jude looked at her then, eyes catching hers. "I think I understand a bit more now, about the rhythm. About people too." Those fingers paused, hovering over the delicate screws. There was something in the way he watched her, an attentiveness that made her pulse quicken, yet calm, all at once. Their conversation drifted naturally, from clocks to horses to the wide-open plains beyond Red Hollow. Every topic somehow circled back to shared understanding, to the quiet intimacy of being seen. Hours passed, unnoticed. Hazel found herself explaining the finer points of clockmaking, the delicate art of balancing tension in a spring, the invisible care it took to keep the hands moving in perfect harmony. Jude listened with a patience that made her want to explain everything, even things she hadn't spoken aloud before. When it was time for him to leave, he paused by the door. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "Maybe you can show me more of the rhythms." Hazel nodded, smiling. "I'll be here. The clocks won't mind." Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the streets of Red Hollow. Jude walked down the main road, the pocket watch ticking reliably in his coat, and a strange sense of anticipation settling over him. Meanwhile, Hazel returned to her bench, but her thoughts lingered on him. On the way, time had slowed in his presence, and on the quiet hope that perhaps some things like people could be fixed gently, together. For the first time in a long while, Hazel realized that the tick-tock of her life wasn't just the rhythm of clocks anymore. It was something more, something that moved with the arrival of a cowboy who had begun to mark time alongside her. Hazel's shop smelled of brass polish and old wood, as evening sunlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the workbenches. She was adjusting the escapement on a delicate wristwatch when the familiar jingle of the doorbell announced a visitor. Jude stepped inside, dust clinging to his coat, boots leaving faint prints on the wooden floor. He carried himself with that same quiet confidence, but there was a lightness in his step today, as though he had been anticipating this moment all afternoon. "Evening, Hazel," he said, tipping his hat. "Jude," she replied, brushing her hands on her apron. "You're just in time. I was about to close for the day." He shook his head. "Can't have that. I need to make sure the watch is still keeping time. Can't have it stopping mid-ride." Hazel smiled and picked up the pocket watch. It had run perfectly since she repaired it, but she examined it anyway, adjusting the minute hand slightly. "It's holding steady," she said. "You take good care of it." He shrugged modestly. "Just trying not to break what's been fixed." For a few moments, they stood in companionable silence, listening to the ticking of the clocks around them. Time seemed to stretch, thick and warm, as if the shop itself recognized the quiet bond growing between them. "You know," Hazel said finally, "it's funny how a watch can do more than tell time. It can mark moments, remind you of people, places, even feelings." Jude raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How so?" She set the watch down and gestured to a grandfather clock in the corner. "Every tick, every talk, it's a heartbeat, a story. This shop, it's full of them. Every repair, every visit, it leaves an echo." Jude's gaze softened. "Sounds like more than clockwork. Sounds like life." Hazel laughed softly, the sound mingling with the ticking around them. "Maybe life is just clockwork we haven't figured out yet." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Then, impulsively, he pulled up a stool and sat beside her workbench. "Teach me," he said. "I want to understand the rhythm, the tick, the talk, everything." Hazel blinked, surprised, then smiled. She handed him a tiny screwdriver and showed him how to remove a small gear from a clock she had been repairing. Together they worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, sending small sparks of warmth that neither could ignore. Hours slipped by unnoticed. They talked quietly as they worked, sharing small stories about life on the range, about family, about the little things that made Red Hollow home. Jude found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, while Hazel discovered that explaining her craft to someone who truly listened made her heart beat a little faster. When the evening shadows deepened, Jude finally stood. "I should be heading back," he said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Hazel watched him go, feeling an unexpected tug of longing. "Tomorrow, same time?" she asked softly. He paused at the door, tipping his hat. "Tomorrow," he promised. And as he stepped into the fading light, Hazel realized the truth. Time had shifted in her shop, and not because of clocks. It had shifted because of him. As the door closed behind him, she returned to her bench. But the tick-tock of the clocks felt different now. Slower, softer, filled with the quiet anticipation of something just beginning, a story not written in hands or gears, but in the moments between them. Time, she thought, wasn't just measured in seconds. Sometimes it was measured in heartbeats, and in the spaces where two people learned to move together. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Hazel's shop, catching the brass and polished wood, making every clock glint like gold. Hazel was adjusting a delicate mantel clock when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up and her heart gave a small, private leap. Jude stepped inside, boots leaving faint dust marks on the floor, hat in hand. He smiled, that easy, disarming grin she had grown accustomed to seeing. Hazel picked up the silver pocket watch, its smooth surface warm under her fingers. She examined it carefully, noting that it had kept perfect time since her last repair. She smiled. "It's doing well," she said. "Better than ever." Jude leaned against the counter, watching her work. "You've got a gift, Hazel. Not just fixing clocks, but making them matter. You make time feel different." Hazel felt her cheeks warm. There was something in his gaze, a mix of admiration, fondness, and something deeper she hadn't named yet. "Maybe it's not the clocks," she said softly. "Maybe it's who we share the time with." He shifted closer. "I think I'm starting to understand that." They spent the next hour side by side, Hazel showing Jude how to adjust a clock's escapement, guiding his hands carefully as he followed her instructions. Their fingers brushed now and then, sending tiny sparks of connection through the room. It was unspoken, yet understood. This shared attention, this patient closeness, was more than just clockwork. "Feels like the shop slows down when you're here," Jude said finally, leaning back against the counter. Hazel smiled, her fingers stilling over the small gears. Maybe time always slows when something or someone is worth noticing. The afternoon shadows stretched long across the floor, but neither of them noticed. They talked quietly about small things, horses, sunsets, the plains beyond Red Hollow, but every word seemed to carry weight. Every glance lingering longer than it should. As the day drew to a close, Jude finally stood, tipping his hat. "I should be heading back," he said, though his voice betrayed reluctance. Hazel walked him to the door, her heart tugging at her with every step. "Tomorrow?" she asked softly. "Tomorrow," he promised. And for the first time, neither of them rushed. They lingered, savoring the moment, letting time stretch between them like a warm, steady rhythm. As he stepped outside and the bell chimed, Hazel returned to her workbench, a small, contented smile on her lips. The clocks ticked steadily around her, but now the sound was differentialer, more melodic, echoing the quiet heartbeat of shared moments. And as she picked up the watch one last time to set it on the counter, she added softly, almost to herself, "Time has a way of telling its own story, if you let it." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.